We are the Eastern Ontario Regional Network, and what our focus and goal is to connect. Can I? Oh, okay. So what we want to do is connect Eastern Ontario to the rest of the world. So what is the Eastern Ontario Regional Network? It's a superhighway built to grow with the bandwidth demands of Eastern Ontario. So one of our key focuses is access. So to 95% of the households and businesses in Eastern Ontario, we will be able to bring up to a 1.5 megabit or higher. Higher speeds is one of our goals, and we hope to be able to provide to 85% of households and businesses 10 megabits of service. And it's no use having a network if people can't afford it. So through our negotiations with our private sector partners, we've been able to negotiate affordable pricing. So where is Eastern Ontario? We run to the Quebec border, up to Port Hope, the Durham region boundary line, up through Algonquin Park to the Haliburton City of Port Lakes area. But we do not include Ottawa in our region. So we have a population of approximately 1.1 million people, and it covers about 50,000 square kilometers. So we always like to say that to give the size for Eastern Ontario, we are about the same size as the province of Nova Scotia, and we are larger than 109 countries in the world. So what is the EORN? It's a superhighway, as I stated, and really it's a network that we hope will drive economic development, improve educational and health services for our region, and to allow governments and its residents to be innovative in the learning knowledge economy. So what is EORN? It's a model for public-private collaboration. We have, EORN has 22 contracts. We have 4 private partners with the project. We have contracts, contribution agreements with the federal and provincial government. It is the vision of the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus. And the caucus started looking at broadband and making it a priority in approximately 2004. In 2006, they partnered with the CFDC to complete a gap strategy analysis of broadband in the region. And at that time, approximately 300,000 folks had little or no connectivity, so basically dial-up. And for us, it's a true game changer for Eastern Ontario to bring those folks the ability to connect. Who is the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus? They're comprised of wardens and mayors of 11 upper-tier municipalities and 2 single tiers. They advocate on behalf of residents in Eastern Ontario on regional issues to the provincial and federal governments. They became a very active group in 2002, and throughout, from that time on, they've completed many reports, studies, worked with both levels of government, and have gained they are highly respected by local levels of our government. So the funding formula that we received in 2010 is Canada provided $55 million towards this project. Ontario provided $55 million. The Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, the 13 members combined, have contributed $10 million, and the private sector, we had hoped when we were looking at the project that they would contribute $50 million, and we're happy to say that that's happened. So I'm now going to turn it over to David Fell.
Sorry. And what that means is that in terms of leverage and investment, the Wardens Caucus was able to get a 21% return on their investment of the $10 million, which is pretty good. But also senior levels of government were able to make their contributions of $55 million and get a minimum 3 to 1, and so was the private sector. And I think that's a model that works well for everyone. So in terms of governance, the new Municipal Act in 2001 allowed for the establishment of corporations for municipalities to set up corporations like this to facilitate private-public partnerships. And when the Wardens Caucus and some of the original people that were working on this project looked at how to set up a governance model and how to implement it, there were other opportunities for implementation. There was an opportunity to have the project outsourced and managed, and that would have cost something between 13 and 15% administrative overhead to manage the project. In fact, we're trending around 3% to finish the project. We have a board of directors that's represented by both members of the public, some of them are here today, and the Wardens Caucus. So the organization is not a wholly owned subsidiary, but it's a substantially controlled subsidiary of the Wardens Caucus. In terms of operation, we do have contracts in our contribution agreement that take us through to 2024. One of the interesting things about setting up a governance model like this in private-public partnerships is often they tend to be direct relationships between governments and the private sector. With EORN in the middle, we were able to work with both sides to meet the requirements of senior levels of government around policy, things like 51% ownership for 7 years. When we started negotiating this contract, originally the typical model for infrastructure ownership was own 100% for 7 years. And as many of our colleagues in the private sector said, how do you own 100% of the internet? It's just not possible. So we were able to negotiate them down to 51% and then assume some of the risks for that as well. We broke the project up into 3 phases. The establishment of a gigabit Ethernet backhaul network. When we went out to tender for this, all of the contracts were publicly tendered through a procurement process managed by the County of Peterborough. We asked for a 1 gigabit network scalable to 10 gig with 60 points of presence. And in fact, we're able to deliver a 10 gigabit Ethernet backbone scalable to 100 gig over the life of the project. There's also a last mile component, building out off of the backbone and delivering that access to communities. And there was always a vision from the Wardens Caucus and some of the, Jim Pine will talk about this, but to make sure that no one was left behind. There will always be people in rural areas that won't have access to a terrestrial solution, and so this is why we incorporated a satellite component to the project. In terms of our construction status, the backbone was started August 31st, 2010. It was actually completed last month, 4 months ahead of schedule. We're having our public launch on Friday of this week in Gananoque. Our satellite provider is EORN Communications, and since we started the project, there have been 2 new satellite launches, and the uptake for satellite has been very positive in the region. And 7 RFPs for 7 access RFPs for 15 different zones with 22 contracts in total. We needed to break the project up into 2 major phases, and as soon as the components of the backbone came live with those 160 points of presence, we wanted to see the service building off of those to deliver access. So all of this is running in parallel. We have project managers, engineers, and finance folks that are trying to maintain the implementation of the project as it rolls out concurrently. In terms of the equipment, it's probably not that relevant other than to say that we have been all along technology neutral. We didn't dictate what type of technology we wanted to get out there, and I know some of our colleagues from around the world might talk about different types of technology and different types of equipment that might be able to deliver solutions like this. But this is the technology and equipment that our private sector partners did in on the projects, and we're now currently delivering. In terms of the backhaul, this is a pretty small map from the distance that you're seeing it, but really you can see that the fiber connects the region, and those 160 points of presence go throughout the entire region. And what the POPs, or the points of presence, mean is that we're getting that access much closer to where citizens and businesses are. Those are the locations of the 160 POPs on a Google map layout. So again, you can see that they're pretty much ubiquitous throughout the region. And we broke the last mile component up into those 7 RFPs, the 15 zones. And this was done so that, for example, up in, is this Emblem?
Yes.
Okay. Well, a lot of people knew that. Emblem I was looking for one of our engineers to tell me if I had the right one. The Emblem zone has already gone live. It's already in service, and customers are signing up, and the deployment and the subscriber uptake has gone really well, and we're building out in the other zones and taking advantage of the backhaul as soon as we can. In terms of satellite, as I mentioned, 2 high throughput satellites have been launched. Subscriber uptake is ramping up rapidly, and for all of those folks who can't get access to a terrestrial solution, they have this as an option. And we were able to bring prices down and make it more affordable. How are we doing? We're on time, on budget. The backbone contract is complete. As Lisa mentioned, in order to trigger the full amount of senior government funding, we needed to get $55 million in cash contributions from the private sector. And we've already exceeded that with $58 million. We still have about 18 months to go to see if we can bring that up. And we have $93 million in in-kind contributions over the next 7 years. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jim Pine.
Thanks, David. If you didn't know, David is the CEO for EORN, and Lisa is the Communications and Stakeholder Relations Officer. I'm what's called the project co-lead. I'm actually a municipal employee. Actually, Lisa's as well. She's seconded. My colleague, Gary King from Peterborough County, we're sort of the link between EORN as a group and the board and the EOWC, which is really the project sponsor. One of the things we wanted to do was just, how do we do this? Because way back in 2004, 2005, 2006 and onwards, none of us in the municipal world would have ever thought, I think, that we would get so directly involved in a project of this magnitude and of this kind of technology-based proposal. That really wasn't in our bailiwick as municipal administrators. But clearly, at the end of the day, we realized that someone had to initiate a game-changer approach to Eastern Ontario because of what was happening in the traditional economy, and that's where our politicians and folks like myself got involved. So it's been a long go, but as David and Lisa said, we're well on our way. We have in the room, as David said, there are a lot of people who are members. That's because we have most of our team here who are working day to day on it, and some of our board members from the EORN as well. So we've got a good turnout. So what do we do? I just thought, well, what is it that really made us successful so far in terms of getting this going? I came up with these, it's not very scholarly, but some words to try and describe how I think over the last 9 or 10 years we've been able to make this thing happen, from chemistry through the last one being fear, and I'll explain that in a second. I think one of the key ingredients to us being fairly successful so far is really putting together a group that's included politicians at all 3 levels, staff, and both federally, provincially, and locally, and the team itself, and developed a chemistry over those years where we ended up actually believing in each other and in this project. And that, I think, was an underlying sort of principle that's helped us move forward. The EOWC, as Lisa said, does a lot of other things, the Eastern Wardens Caucus, other than this project. And we have, for about 10 years, worked with the federal and provincial governments around a whole host of things like local tax policy and those sorts of things, other economic development initiatives. And frankly, both the federal and provincial governments, when they were talking about giving us money, only wanted to work with a group that was going to be successful, at least they thought would be successful. And we've proven ourselves over that time with the 2 levels of government. So as an advocacy group, we got some credibility that we could deliver on things. One of the key things we knew early on is that in order for this really to be successful, in other words, successful being getting money from the federal and provincial governments, $110 million, we needed to find within both levels of government some key individual champions at the political level and at the staff level, and work those concurrently as we talked about this project with them. We were able to do that federally and provincially. My local member for the federal parliament and also my local MPP at the time were very committed to this project, and they worked the levers inside government through cabinet in both cases to get approval for the monies. And that was a long go, but they stuck with us. And we did the same with the staff. We did it all concurrently in terms of our advocacy work. And of course, the one thing that underlied the whole thing was the fact that the public in Eastern Ontario very much wanted to get connected. And as Lisa said, the early studies said almost a third of the population only had dial-up. And we always say in our public meetings, when we do a lot of these, how many people in the room have dial-up? And you'd be surprised the number of hands that go up. And we say, what you really have is a modern form of torture if you have to use the internet through dial-up. And so there's this pent-up demand in the public for the project, which was very helpful. Yes, we had to stick with it. We were dedicated to it. And of course, nobody wanted to fail on this one at the end of the day, because we realized the demand was so large and important that we just wanted to make sure we weren't going to fail, so we stuck with it. A couple of maybe some best practices coming out of it. I think the thing that's been very helpful to us is we had a clear purpose in this project. And that was in part very much defined by the work of Laura Braodband, who's our chief engineer in the project, who at the outset when we brought Laura in said, look, if you're going to put a project together, you got to know what you want to deliver at the end of the day to the public and to the business. So she helped put that project definition together. It was a reasonable vision, we thought, and certainly was one that we could sustain. So that helped us build the support going forward. So we knew what we wanted. David mentioned the fact that we could have outsourced this project management for this project. And there was a lot of pressure to do that. And we said, we don't think we really want to go that way. We want to keep control of the whole project ourselves. So we said, we won't go that way. And we had a lot of discussions with the folks federally and provincially about that. They were concerned we couldn't find the right people to help us deliver the project. At the end of the day, I think we've done that very well in terms of the team that we've put together that David now leads. And we've been able to use the mix of skills that they've all brought to the table. And we've done it for about 3% of the cost versus a typical 12 to 15. So we've done it in a very affordable way. David mentioned that at least mentioned we have 22 contracts with the private sector partners who without their participation we couldn't do this work. But one of the things that we've learned a number of things in those negotiations is that you better get the right skills in the room when you're negotiating. And so we did. We brought in legal assistance for us and technical and financial assistance as we negotiated the deals. And that was key for us because this is a business arrangement. We want the network to be profitable, of course, so it goes on and on. And so we had to stay focused on getting the right skills to do the negotiations in the room. And we think we've been reasonably successful. And the last thing is, we know that we're here for the long term, right through 2024, at least. And in order to keep the momentum going, we have to talk to people all the time. And we're out there doing that regularly. We never stop talking about the project and the benefits we think it's going to bring. Because people's interests wane and wax over the years, of course. So we're out there talking as much as we can. I think Lisa and I have done, I don't know, we're probably getting close to 100 or more individual presentations this year and past year, but more than that. So talk. I know we're behind, so I'll skip ahead. What's next? We're looking at finding ways to bring better connectivity to places like business parks in Eastern Ontario. Got an RFP out there. We're going to evaluate that. That's now closed because we know we can do a little bit more through the project. We're going to try and do that. Also connect some key municipal facilities. Lisa and I both had the opportunity, and Laura, to travel as a result of this project. I said, I don't get paid for this, but I do accept travel vouchers. So we had a chance to go to Dallas to speak to the U.S. Community Broadband conference there in the spring, and that was an eye-opener for us, and I think for them as well in terms of what we presented. And we just got back from England, from London, where we spoke to an international conference on our project. And we're hoping maybe that Dubai and other places are going to call us up and come on over. Some folks may go to Nigeria with me, David. I don't know. Anyway, we're out there talking about it. It's important, we think, to continue to talk about it and partner where we can. And if there's any questions, Lisa will handle all of them. Thanks very much.